Let's be brutally honest about something that every person dealing with an avoidant attachment style needs to understand. Their silence isn't random, it's strategic. Whether conscious or unconscious, avoidants use silence as their primary weapon to maintain control and distance in relationships. But here's what they don't expect, and what most people never realize. You can turn their own silence against them by understanding the psychological timing that governs their behavior. Most relationship advice tells you to chase, to be patient, to understand their needs. I'm here to tell you, that's exactly backwards. The avoidant silence is designed to make you pursue, to make you anxious, to make you prove your worth. But when you understand the deeper psychological mechanisms at play, you can flip this dynamic entirely and make their silence work for you instead of against you. The key lies in understanding that avoidants operate on predictable psychological cycles. They pull away when they feel too close, they return when they feel you might actually be moving on, and they use silence as a way to test your attachment and maintain their sense of power. But these cycles have specific timing patterns that, once understood, can be leveraged to completely reverse the dynamic. However, before we dive into these timing strategies, we need to address something crucial. There's a fundamental difference between working with avoidant attachment patterns and tolerating character defects that masquerade as attachment issues. Some behaviors that people mistake for avoidant attachment are actually indicators of deeper character flaws that no amount of strategic timing can fix. These behaviors reveal individuals who lack the basic empathy, integrity, and respect necessary for healthy relationships, regardless of their attachment wounds or psychological explanations. Understanding this distinction becomes critical when deciding whether someone deserves your strategic investment or should be permanently eliminated from your life. Genuine avoidant patterns, while challenging, can be worked with when the person demonstrates authentic remorse, accountability, and willingness to change. But certain behaviors cross lines that no amount of attachment healing can excuse, revealing character defects that make healthy relationships impossible. Let me be clear about something from the start. If your avoidant has engaged in any of the following behaviors, no timing strategy will work, because you're not dealing with attachment issues, you're dealing with fundamental character defects. These behaviors should immediately disqualify them from any further consideration, regardless of how well you understand their psychological patterns. First, if they pursued or entertained other romantic connections during periods of separation or distance in your relationship, you're not dealing with avoidant attachment, you're dealing with someone who views relationships as interchangeable commodities. The genuine avoidant who truly values what they shared with you doesn't immediately seek replacement connections when they pull away. They sit with their discomfort, they process their fears, they work through their attachment wounds. The person who uses separation as an opportunity to explore other options isn't avoiding intimacy out of fear, they're avoiding commitment to you specifically. This behavior reveals someone who operates from scarcity and treats love as a generic experience that can be found with anyone, rather than recognizing the irreplaceable nature of genuine connection. They're not processing their attachment issues, they're shopping for alternatives while keeping you as a backup option. This fundamental lack of respect for the uniqueness of your connection disqualifies them from serious relationship consideration, regardless of how well you understand their timing patterns. Second, if they consistently dismiss or minimize your emotional responses to their behavior, labeling you as too sensitive, dramatic, or unreasonable, you're dealing with someone who lacks the fundamental empathy necessary for healthy relationships. This emotional invalidation is a form of psychological abuse that reveals their inability to take responsibility for the impact of their choices on others. The person with genuine empathy understands that impact matters more than intent. Even if they didn't mean to cause harm, they recognize that harm was caused and respond with appropriate concern and accountability. The avoidant who minimizes your emotional responses is protecting their ego at the expense of your emotional reality. creating a dynamic where your feelings will never be respected or valued. This invalidation serves to avoid responsibility, maintain superiority, and prevent them from doing the difficult work of genuine accountability and change. They're establishing a precedent where your emotional responses will always be subject to their approval, creating a form of gaslighting that destroys self-trust and emotional integrity. This pattern doesn't improve with time or strategic timing. It becomes more entrenched as they learn they can avoid accountability through invalidation. Third, if they refuse to take specific accountability for their harmful actions, attempting reconciliation through charm and promises while avoiding direct acknowledgement of their behavior, you're dealing with someone who wants the benefits of relationships without the responsibilities. True accountability requires specific acknowledgement of harmful actions, understanding of their impact, and concrete plans for behavioral change. The person who offers only vague apologies and future promises is attempting to manipulate their way back into your life without doing the work necessary for real change. They want to start fresh without dealing with the consequences of their choices, creating a dynamic where they learn that they can escape accountability through time and charm. This sets a dangerous precedent that no amount of strategic timing can overcome because they've demonstrated their fundamental unwillingness to take responsibility for their actions. Fourth, if they consistently position themselves as the victim in every conflict or difficult situation, they lack the emotional maturity necessary for healthy relationships. This victim mentality prevents them from taking genuine responsibility for their role in problems and creates a dynamic where they're never accountable for relationship difficulties. The person who always finds ways to make themselves the injured party in every scenario has perfected the art of deflection and manipulation. They flip every conversation about their behavior into a discussion about how they've been wronged, using this strategy to avoid accountability and manipulate your empathy. This pattern reveals someone who fundamentally believes they shouldn't have to take responsibility for the impact of their choices on others, making them incapable of the growth necessary for healthy relationships. Finally, if they have ever deliberately humiliated you, either publicly or privately, they should never be welcomed back into your life under any circumstances. Humiliation represents a level of cruelty and disrespect that transcends attachment issues and reveals fundamental character defects that make healthy relationships impossible. The person who deliberately attacks your dignity and self-worth has crossed a line that should never be forgiven or forgotten. Humiliation involves deliberate attempts to diminish your worth, embarrass you, or attack your deepest insecurities with the specific intent to cause maximum psychological damage. This behavior reveals someone who not only lacks empathy but actively enjoys causing pain to people who trust them. The capacity for humiliation indicates serious personality disorders beyond simple attachment trauma. Healthy people, even those with significant emotional wounds, don't deliberately set out to destroy their partner's sense of self-worth. If your avoidant has engaged in any of these behaviors, stop reading now. No timing strategy will work because you're not dealing with attachment issues, you're dealing with character defects that don't improve with time, therapy, or strategic manipulation. These behaviors reveal fundamental unsuitability for intimate relationships, and taking them back teaches them that they can engage in destructive behavior without serious consequences. However, if you're dealing with genuine avoidant attachment patterns without these character defects, then understanding timing becomes your most powerful tool for transformation. The avoidant silence isn't just about needing space, it's about maintaining control and managing their own anxiety about intimacy. But this silence operates on predictable cycles that can be leveraged to create pursuit behavior instead of avoidance. The first timing hack involves understanding the avoidance deactivation cycle. When an avoidant pulls away, they're not just creating distance, they're deactivating their attachment system to manage their anxiety about closeness. This deactivation follows a specific timeline: initial withdrawal, peak deactivation, and gradual reactivation. Most people make the mistake of pursuing during the initial withdrawal phase, which only reinforces the avoidance need to create more distance. Instead, you need to match their energy during the withdrawal phase, creating what I call mirrored silence. Mirrored silence doesn't mean ignoring them or playing games. It means respecting their need for space while simultaneously showing them that you're not going to chase their validation. This approach accomplishes two critical things. It prevents you from reinforcing their avoidant behavior through pursuit, and it creates uncertainty about your availability, which triggers their attachment system in a way that pursuit never could. The key timing element here is patience during the deactivation phase. Avoidants expect you to become anxious and pursue them during this time. When you don't, it creates cognitive dissonance that forces them to question their assumptions about your attachment to them. This uncertainty becomes the catalyst for their reactivation, but only if you maintain consistent boundaries during their withdrawal. The second timing hack involves understanding the avoidants' fear of abandonment beneath their distancing behavior. While avoidants appear to be afraid of intimacy, they're actually terrified of abandonment, which is why they create distance as a protective mechanism. This fear operates on a subconscious level, which means they're not consciously aware of how their behavior might actually create the abandonment they fear. The timing strategy here involves what I call strategic unavailability during their reactivation phase. When the avoidant begins to re-engage after a period of distance, most people immediately reward this behavior with enthusiastic response and availability. This actually reinforces the avoidant's belief that they can control the relationship through their distance and return pattern. Instead, you need to be selectively available during their reactivation attempts, creating just enough uncertainty to activate their attachment system without completely shutting them out. This doesn't mean being cruel or manipulative. It means having genuine boundaries and priorities that don't revolve around their availability. When they reach out after a period of silence, you respond warmly, but not immediately. When they suggest spending time together, you're sometimes available and sometimes genuinely busy with other commitments. This creates a dynamic where they can't predict your availability, which triggers their attachment system in a way that constant availability never could. The third timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's internal narrative about relationships. Avoidants often tell themselves stories about why relationships don't work, why intimacy is dangerous, and why they're better off alone. These narratives are reinforced every time someone pursues them during their withdrawal phases, confirming their belief that people are needy and relationships are suffocating. The timing strategy here involves disrupting these narratives through unexpected behavior during key moments. When the avoidant expects you to pursue, you don't. When they expect you to be available, you're sometimes not. When they expect you to be upset about their distance, you're understanding but not desperate. This creates cognitive dissonance that forces them to question their assumptions about relationships and about you specifically. The key timing element is consistency over time. You can't disrupt an avoidance narratives with occasional strategic behavior. You need to consistently demonstrate that you're not going to fit into their preconceived notions about how relationships work. This requires patience and emotional regulation on your part, but the payoff is significant. The avoidant begins to see you as different from their past experiences, which creates space for genuine connection. The fourth timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's need for control in relationships. Avoidants use silence and distance as control mechanisms, testing your attachment and maintaining their sense of power in the relationship. They're unconsciously asking, how much will you chase me? How much will you tolerate? How much power do I have over your emotional state? Every time you pursue during their withdrawal, you're answering these questions in a way that reinforces their controlling behavior. The timing strategy here involves what I call emotional sovereignty during their testing phases. When the avoidant creates distance or uses silence as a test, you need to demonstrate that your emotional well-being isn't dependent on their behavior. This doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. It means maintaining your emotional center regardless of their actions. The critical timing element is your response during the first few hours after they withdraw. This is when the avoidant is most attuned to your reaction, gauging whether their behavior has created the anxiety and pursuit they expect. If you respond with immediate pursuit or anxiety, you reinforce their behavior. If you respond with calm acceptance and continue with your life, you disrupt their expectations and create uncertainty about their control over you. The fifth timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's ambivalent relationship with their own emotions. Avoidants don't actually lack emotions. They suppress them as a protective mechanism. This suppression creates internal pressure that builds over time, eventually requiring release. Understanding this emotional cycle allows you to time your own emotional expressions for maximum impact. The timing strategy here involves what I call emotional contrast during their suppression phases. When the avoidant is in emotional suppression mode, trying to convince themselves they don't need connection, you need to provide subtle emotional warmth without being overwhelming. This creates a contrast between their internal emotional state and your external emotional availability that highlights what they're missing. The key timing element is subtlety during these phases. Grand emotional gestures will trigger their avoidant defenses. Instead, you need to provide consistent, low-key emotional warmth that slowly penetrates their defensive barriers. This might involve sharing something meaningful but not overwhelming, expressing appreciation for small things, or simply being emotionally present without demanding reciprocation. The sixth timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's relationship with commitment and future planning. Avoidants often struggle with commitment because it requires them to confront their attachment fears directly. They prefer to keep relationships in a state of ambiguity where they can maintain their sense of freedom while still receiving the benefits of connection. The timing strategy here involves what I call commitment visibility during their ambiguous phases. Instead of demanding commitment directly, you need to demonstrate your own commitment to your values, goals, and well-being. You make plans for your future that may or may not include them, and you follow through on these plans regardless of their participation. The critical timing element is consistency in your own commitment to your life path. When the avoidant sees that you're moving forward with your life plans, whether or not they participate, it creates urgency about their own involvement. They begin to fear that they might miss out on something valuable if they don't make a decision about their level of commitment. The seventh timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's fear of being known deeply. Avoidants create distance, not just to avoid intimacy, but to avoid being truly seen and potentially rejected for who they really are. This fear operates on a deep level and requires careful timing to address effectively. The timing strategy here involves what I call gradual revelation during their vulnerable moments. When the avoidant shares something personal or shows a moment of vulnerability, you need to respond with acceptance and understanding without immediately reciprocating with your own vulnerability. This creates a safe space for them to be seen without feeling overwhelmed by intimacy. The key timing element is patience with the gradual nature of this process. Avoidants will test your acceptance of their true selves slowly, revealing small pieces of themselves over time. If you respond to each revelation with calm acceptance and without pushing for more, you create a dynamic where they feel safe to be gradually more authentic. The eighth timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's relationship with conflict and difficult conversations. Avoidants often withdraw during conflict not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to navigate emotional intensity without losing themselves. This withdrawal during conflict reinforces their belief that relationships are too complicated and emotionally demanding. The timing strategy here involves what I call conflict patience during their withdrawal phases. When the avoidant withdraws during or after conflict, you need to give them space to process without pursuing resolution immediately. However, you also need to maintain your own boundaries about acceptable behavior and timelines for resolution. The critical timing element is your approach when they're ready to re-engage after conflict. Most people either act like nothing happened or immediately dive back into the conflict. Instead, you need to acknowledge their process while maintaining your own needs for resolution. This might sound like, "I understand you needed space to process. I'm ready to work through this when you are, and I need us to resolve this within the next few days." The ninth timing hack involves understanding the avoidance relationship with appreciation and recognition. Avoidants often struggle to express appreciation because it requires them to acknowledge their dependence on others. However, they desperately need appreciation for their efforts, especially their attempts to overcome their avoidant tendencies. The timing strategy here involves what I call strategic appreciation during their effort phases. When the avoidant makes an effort to be more present, communicative, or vulnerable, you need to acknowledge these efforts without making them feel like they're being managed or manipulated. This requires appreciating their process rather than just their results. The key timing element is immediate but subtle acknowledgement of their efforts. When the avoidant does something that represents growth or increased availability, you need to notice and appreciate it in the moment without making it feel like a performance. This might involve saying something like, "I really appreciate you sharing that with me," or "It means a lot that you made time for this." The 10th timing hack involves understanding the avoidant's need for autonomy within connection. Avoidants don't actually want to be alone. They want to maintain their sense of individual identity while being in relationship. This requires careful timing of your own needs for connection and togetherness. The timing strategy here involves what I call autonomy respect during their independence phases. When the avoidant asserts their need for individual space or activities, you need to support this autonomy while maintaining your own sense of self. This creates a dynamic where they don't feel like they have to choose between relationship and autonomy. The critical timing element is your response to their autonomy needs. If you respond with anxiety or insecurity every time they assert independence, you reinforce their belief that relationships are suffocating. If you respond with support and your own healthy independence, you create a dynamic where autonomy and connection can coexist. Now let's talk about the most powerful timing strategy of all, the strategic pause. This involves creating deliberate pauses in communication and availability that mirror the avoidant's own patterns, but with intentional purpose. The strategic pause isn't about punishment or manipulation. It's about creating space for the avoidant to feel their own attachment feelings without the pressure of immediate response. The timing of strategic pauses is crucial. They should occur during periods when the avoidant is in their comfort zone, feeling secure about your availability. This is when a pause creates the most impact because it disrupts their expectations without triggering their defensive systems. The pause should be long enough to create uncertainty, but not so long that it triggers abandonment fears. During strategic pauses, you continue living your life fully without broadcasting your activities or trying to make the avoidant jealous. The goal is to create space for them to miss you and to recognize the value of your presence in their life. This often triggers their attachment system in a way that constant availability never could. The key to successful strategic pauses is your own emotional regulation during these periods. If you're using the pause to manipulate or punish, the avoidant will sense this and respond defensively. If you're using the pause to create healthy space for both of you to process your feelings, it becomes a tool for relationship growth. Another crucial timing element involves understanding the avoidant's seasonal patterns. Many avoidants have cyclical patterns related to stress, anniversaries, or life transitions. Understanding these patterns allows you to anticipate their withdrawal phases and respond strategically rather than reactively. For example, if your avoidant typically withdraws during work stress periods, you can prepare by ensuring you have your own support systems and activities during these times. This prevents you from taking their withdrawal personally and allows you to maintain your emotional center while they process their stress. The timing strategy here involves what I call pattern preparation. Instead of being caught off guard by predictable withdrawal phases, you prepare for them by strengthening your own emotional resources and creating space for their process. This demonstrates emotional maturity and reduces the conflict that often occurs during these predictable, difficult periods. It's also important to understand the timing of avoidant reactivation. When an avoidant begins to re-engage after a period of distance, they're often testing the waters to see if you're still available and interested. This is a critical moment that requires careful timing in your response. The timing strategy here involves what I call graduated availability. You don't immediately return to full availability when they re-engage, but you also don't punish them for their previous withdrawal. Instead, you gradually increase your availability as they demonstrate consistent engagement. This creates a dynamic where they have to invest in rebuilding connection rather than assuming they can pick up where they left off. The key timing element is matching their energy and investment level. If they're putting in minimal effort to reconnect, you respond with appropriate but not overwhelming warmth. If they're making significant efforts to rebuild connection, you can be more generous with your availability and emotional energy. Understanding the timing of avoidant decision-making is also crucial. Avoidants often need extended periods to process major relationship decisions. They don't make decisions quickly about commitment, moving in together, or other relationship milestones. Pressuring them for quick decisions usually triggers their avoidant defenses. The timing strategy here involves what I call decision space. When facing important relationship decisions, you give the avoidant appropriate time to process while maintaining your own boundaries about timelines. This might involve saying something like, "I understand you need time to think about this. I'm comfortable giving you 2 weeks to process, and then I'll need to know your thoughts so I can make my own decisions." This approach respects their processing needs while maintaining your own agency in the relationship. It prevents the avoidant from using extended decision-making as a way to avoid commitment, while also preventing you from making ultimatums that trigger their defensive systems. The timing of emotional conversations is another critical element. Avoidants often need preparation for emotional conversations and don't respond well to ambush-style emotional discussions. Understanding this allows you to time these conversations for maximum effectiveness. The timing strategy here involves what I call emotional preparation. Instead of springing emotional conversations on the avoidant, you give them advance notice about needing to discuss something important. This allows them to prepare emotionally and reduces their defensive responses. This might involve saying something like, I'd like to talk about something important to me. When would be a good time for you to have this conversation?" This approach respects their need for emotional preparation while ensuring that important conversations actually happen. Finally, the most important timing element involves understanding when to walk away. Not every avoidant attachment pattern can be worked with, and some people use avoidant behavior as a cover for deeper character issues. Understanding the difference between workable avoidant patterns and fundamental incompatibility is crucial for your own well-being. The timing strategy here involves what I call progress assessment. You give the relationship a reasonable timeline for improvement and growth. If the avoidant shows genuine progress in addressing their attachment patterns and meeting your needs, you continue investing in the relationship. If they continue the same patterns without growth or accountability, you have your answer about their capacity for change. This assessment should include specific behavioral changes, not just promises or temporary improvements. The avoidant who is genuinely working on their attachment issues will show consistent progress over time, not just sporadic improvements during crisis periods. Remember, all of these timing strategies only work with people who have the fundamental capacity for empathy, growth, and genuine connection. If you're dealing with someone who has exhibited the character defects I outlined earlier, no amount of strategic timing will create a healthy relationship. These strategies are tools for working with genuine attachment issues, not for managing abusive or manipulative behavior. The goal of understanding avoidant timing isn't to manipulate or control another person. It's to create space for genuine connection by working with their attachment system rather than against it. When done with authentic care and respect, these timing strategies can help both partners feel more secure and connected. The avoidant who is capable of growth will respond to these strategies by gradually becoming more available, more communicative, and more emotionally present. They'll begin to see that healthy relationships don't require them to sacrifice their autonomy or lose themselves in another person. They'll learn that they can be fully themselves while still being deeply connected to someone who respects their process and their needs. However, the person who responds to these strategies with increased manipulation, control, or emotional abuse is showing you their true character. These behaviors indicate that you're not dealing with attachment issues, but with fundamental character defects that make healthy relationships impossible. Your emotional well-being and self-respect should never be sacrificed for any relationship, regardless of how well you understand someone's attachment patterns. The timing strategies I've outlined are tools for creating healthy connection, not for tolerating unhealthy behavior. Use them wisely and remember that the right person for you will appreciate your understanding and respond with genuine growth and increased connection. The avoidant who is worth your time and emotional investment will gradually learn to trust your consistency and respect your boundaries. They'll begin to see that healthy relationships enhance their life rather than threaten their autonomy. And most importantly, they'll demonstrate through their actions that they value your presence enough to do the difficult work of overcoming their attachment fears. But if someone continues to use their attachment issues as an excuse for disrespectful or harmful behavior, it's time to recognize that you're not dealing with attachment issues at all. You're dealing with character defects that no amount of understanding or strategic timing can fix. In those cases, the only winning move is to walk away and invest your energy in someone who has the fundamental capacity for healthy relationship. Show no mercy to those who have shown no mercy to you, and remember that you deserve a partner who treats you with basic respect, empathy, and consideration, even during their most difficult moments. Don't sacrifice your standards or compromise your worth for someone who has proven themselves incapable of meeting the minimum requirements for healthy relationships.